All right, well, not the only one. Let's talk about some notable players to file for arbitration with the current age. And you get a look at them, and some names on here. Troy Terry sticks out to me at 1.45 in Anaheim. He's obviously done some good things. Gustafsson is in the mix. Jeremy Swayman. Your overall thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really good players here that when you look at their price tag, just comparatively speaking in the market, they're going to get a raise. I mean, that's why some of these are done here with arbitration. But interesting ones there. Jeremy Swayman is one that kind of jumps out to me. You've got a goaltender here with him and the Boston Bruins. We'll see kind of where this goes. And Trent Frederick, obviously, from the Bruins as well. So these are interesting situations, I think, that have evolved over the years, but I remember back in the day when guys would go through it, they're like, you don't want to do that. Like, it's a terrible spot to be in. So I think we've gotten to a point where players aren't coming out of this and teams aren't coming out with angst. Maybe sometimes they are, but I feel like it used to be more of that in the past.
Well, yeah, and to me, you look at those two guys you mentioned, Swayman and Frederick, the big thing is the Bruins are up against the cap. These guys are both looking for big raises, I would think, I mean, from what their performance is. So, I mean, now the Bruins got some work to do, and how do we fit them in? It's the same way with Samsonov is looking for a big raise. Is there going to be a buyout of Murray, the other backup for the backup for the Leafs? Are these guys, you know, I mean, it's going to be a difficult situation. Let's see how it works out. I think it's going to, I don't know who's got who's holding the right cards here, but I mean, it's a gamble.
And a lot of times too, when you talk about it being a gamble, these guys are filing for arbitration. They'll get their hearing dates, and you can still come to an agreement before those dates. So at times, sometimes this is part of the negotiation tactics as well. So we'll see how some of these play out.
Well, let me tell you, they don't want to go to arbitration. Like, I mean, the arbitration and from the stuff I've been involved with hearing and reading the arbitration things, the team is telling you every bad thing you've ever done.
And you're like, why do you even want to sign me?
And some players have gone in there and they come out of there. I remember one player from Washington went in there and he came out and he was so depressed. Yeah. Like, I mean, you just don't want to do it. I mean, they're telling you all the great things they did, and the arbitration, they're telling you all the bad things you do, and man, it's just stay away and let your agent do the work.
Yeah.
It's a lot like television. Listen, let's go out west now and talk about Vince Dunn. What a good season he had. And, of course, the Seattle Kraken step up big time from their inaugural season into this year. Vince Dunn, 14 goals, 50 assists, 64 points. How about this move by him?
Yeah, I mean, he had a phenomenal season. I mean, he was one of the really big spots on this team. And there was a lot. There's an awesome story out in Seattle this year. But his game got to another level. He got more opportunity, more ice time, and a lot more production, as you saw there. And he's looking to be paid closer to market value in that situation. And that's where, again, a lot of these won't even get to the arbitration date. But then that's where a lot of it comes into play. He's had a fantastic year, but then you got to try to keep costs down if you're the franchise as well, and that's where it gets a little tricky.
They probably want to pay him all that kind of money, but I mean, like you said, they got to try to keep the cost down as much as they can. But 64 points and averaging almost 24 minutes a night, that's number one D status, and so he's probably going to be looked to try to get paid like a number one or number two D.
Yeah, he should.
He's just 26-year-old, so very much still in his prime. We'll see what happens out there. All right, let's switch gears. Let's go back east. Ilya Samsonov, 3 years in Washington, last year in Toronto, 42 games played, .233 goals against average, .919 save percentage.
Yeah, I mean, he earned himself a starting job, and that wasn't necessarily the case when he was in Washington. I remember that time where it's him and Vanacek, and Vanacek seemed to kind of get, if I recall, more of the starts there, and he was the guy. So he's established himself as a starter. I thought he was really solid, Bruce, this year in Toronto. And it's the same kind of situation. Am I the starter? You know, if you kind of crowned me that this year, and this is part of that pushing up, if you will, by the agent to try to get the salary up.
Yeah, well, he signed a team-friendly contract to get there. And he just proved that he earned his way to being the number one goalie on the Toronto Maple Leafs. So if he's going to be the number one goalie, he's not going to make a $1.8 million again next year. He's going to want a hefty raise, because I look at the goalies that are out there in the free agency, and I mean, he's as good as any of them and better than most of them. So, I mean, I think he deserves a raise. It just depends on whether Toronto wants to give it to him or not.
And what I like about this, too, is, I mean, you're talking about a high pick from the Capitals, right?
Yeah.
So he was a first-round pick by them. And to sign that team-friendly deal getting us almost a second chance in Toronto, right? And that was a team where there's a lot of pressure. So I love when players are like, all right, just put me in a spot where I can have some opportunity. I'll do the rest. And it's not about what you make in that year, but now after he has produced, now it is a little more about getting paid for what you've done.
Yeah. Well, he was signed as a backup. Matt Murray was the starter, making, I think he's close to $5 million or plus. Now the thing is, they're probably going to buy out Matt Murray, and then so he's going to say, well, they bought him out for $5 million. I got to see it, because they got that goaltender that they called up from the Marlies in the playoffs, Justin Boll, I think. Yeah, Joseph Wall. And so, I mean, he's going to be making the $775, so you may as well pay him a little bit more.
Go back out west now to Anaheim and Troy Terry. This is a kid that's found a way to win at a lot of different levels. Stand out at DU, stand out at the NTDP. Last year, 70 games played, comes away with 61 points. 6 years in Anaheim, what happens in this situation?
I mean, he had that explosive year 2 years ago with his goal scoring, and he's just developed more and more to be a consistent offensive player for this Ducks team, who I think has a bright future, and they've got a lot of age-appropriate players that are around that same age window, and a lot of talent. So this is you watch on a lot of their behind-the-scenes kind of clips and the way that he was treated there. He's a leader on this team too. So with that responsibility, you know, he's been very good for the Anaheim Ducks.
If they want to get better, they got to sign him. Like, I mean, they can't just keep going down to youthfulness. I mean, they've got a number 2 in Fantilli. He's going to need somebody to play with. Or number 2 in Leo Carlson. Sorry.
Carlson.
I always thought it was going to be Fantilli,
Yeah.
so that's where I'm wrong. And but Leo Carlson's going to need a right winger to play with, and he seems to be a great fit for him. And I got to believe he's going to get it, you know, from 1.4 million to whatever he's going to earn. It's going to be quite a raise, and the Ducks have a lot of cap space, so they'll be able to accommodate him.
Yeah, I think that one gets done for sure. I mean, you maybe we're hanging on to see if you got a little bit of a higher pick. Maybe Bedard was in the mix, but smart play. I'm sure Terry remains there.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of these, and that's the point, just to reemphasize, is that these guys, most of these will get done. So this is part of the process with RFAs. Yeah.
All right, switching gears again, let's talk about Tanner Jeannot, the Oxbow Ox. And Tampa Bay gave up a lot for this guy. 3 years at Nash, 20 games played last year, 4 points, -6.
This is one that kind of jumps out at me a little bit because of what was given up for him. We know about his nasty injury, but I also think with some of the players exiting and that Tampa has had to part ways with, I mean, Tanner Jeannot, for what he's done, he's going to have to do all the heavy lifting here. The physicality that he's going to have to bring. I mean, Tampa got a lot lighter. They're not as much meat in their lineup. So Tanner Jeannot, like we know how many fights he's had in his rookie year. He was, what do you have, 20-some goals, and I think led the NHL in fights. So
yes.
yeah, so this is something that's it's going to be time for him to kind of get paid, and they need him to do that heavy lifting for him this year.
Well, you know, I'm not into management or not a manager or anything, but I got to think, when you give up all those draft choices for this guy, they got to sign him. But his year was horrible. I mean, 6 goals coming from a 20-plus season, and then he gets hurt. But I think they'll both people want to compromise, and they both want to stay in Tampa, and I think they'll make this work. But I mean, if he had the same kind of year that he had the previous year, the money that he's going to make would have been an awful lot more.
Yeah, and in these teams too, a lot of the moves they even make or have made up to this point, they know that these players are going to file, right? So they know, and they've kind of already made some wiggle room for themselves to get these players signed.